Since we, as a nation, insist on interfering in the Middle East, it behooves us to do some background reading. One all too appropriate book is The Jewish War, written nearly 2 millennia ago by Flavius Josephus. Josephus gives a contemporary account of the Great Jewish Rebellion against Rome. The insurrection began in 66 AD and lasted 7 years. The Middle East described by Josephus is perfectly familiar, a politically fractionalized land populated with a jumble of ethnic and religious groups. There are Jews, Arabs, Egyptians, Syrians, Greeks, Italians, and, presumably, a smattering of Christians. Each detests the others. Extreme political and theological views prevail. Terrorism and assassination are commonplace. Alliances are momentary, grudges perennial, and neither colonial subjugation nor local autonomy suffices to keep the peace. The political events are familiar too. Rome first intervened in the region as a peacekeeper, brokering a dispute between Seleucid Mesopotamia and Ptolemaic Egypt. Later, the Middle East appeared vital to Rome because Roman trade routes passed through the region, and because, if the Parthian threat to the empire's eastern frontier, the Romans were lured into deep military and political involvement, and this triggered continual insurrections. The rebellion of 66 AD, however, did not begin as a war of national liberation. It began as communal rioting in the seaport town of Caesarea, Greeks versus Jews over an empty lot next to a synagogue. This inspired sympathetic rioting in Jerusalem, and a ham-fisted Roman attempt to quell the disturbances worsened them instead. The result was one of those great wallows of siege, massacre, treachery, persecution, revenge, plunder, and self-destruction to which the Middle East is so often host. Before the revolt was fairly underway, quarreling had broken out between radical and moderate factions in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, local government troops withdrew from the fray, leaving a greatly outnumbered Roman garrison trapped in the palace of Herod. The Romans surrendered to the mob on the guarantee of safe conduct, and were murdered as soon as they had downed their weapons. The rising in Jerusalem set off a reaction among the non-Jewish inhabitants of the region, who indulged themselves in wild pogroms, with killings taking place as far away as Damascus and Alexandria. Roman military forces were not sufficient to quash the rebellion. Jewish forces were not sufficient to defeat the Romans in open combat. Guerrilla warfare ensued, with predictable consequences to the populace. The Romans were notable for vigorous foreign policy responses. The Emperor Nero sent Vespasian and 3 legions to pacify Judea. Using a great deal of slaughter and some tactics, Vespasian drove the rebels back to the environs of Jerusalem. He was prevented from ending the war, however, by political confusion at home. Nero was ousted, and 3 worthless and short-lived emperors followed within the year. The Jews made use of this breathing space by engaging in urban warfare with themselves, and by committing all conceivable and some inconceivable atrocities upon their co-religionists. Vespasian himself was finally proclaimed emperor by the Roman army, and the war was resumed under the direction of his son Titus. After a prolonged and disgusting siege, Jerusalem was taken, and after another prolonged and even more disgusting siege, Masada, the last rebel stronghold, fell. The temple was destroyed, the Jewish upper classes were dispersed, and a Roman army was permanently stationed in Judea. Even then, the peace did not hold, and rebellion would break out anew in the reign of Hadrian. The Jewish War is a moral oxymoron. It doesn't help us understand the Middle East or know what to do there, but it does lend a fullness and a depth to our incomprehension, and it provides us with a vast crowd of historical company in our impotence and confusion. Excerpts from the essay by P.J. O'Rourke, the 2,000-year-old U.S. Middle East policy expert, from Give War a Chance.